Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Market Check, brought to you by BB. There is no second best daily YouTube live stream to talk about markets. You'll have to excuse me a little bit today, guys. I'll probably be a little bit rusty with the intros and the outros, but I am so happy to be back. We're going to have a great show for you. I am Tommy. You also know me, of course, as Snorlax. I am joined by Max, Big Louie Tuesday, and Jackass. Welcome, guys. Hope we've had a great week thus far. Happy Tuesday. As always, quite a lot to discuss. I've been loving the debate on the panel here over the last few episodes, and yeah, now we've got kind of some fuel to add to the fire, obviously, with a headline this morning. We've got a staking ETF from Fidelity. I think we have even more tariff news that came out this morning against Canada. And ultimately, as we always say, lots of opportunities in the coming weeks that I'm getting really excited about. I definitely want to discuss some of those things on this show. But of course, before we can get cooking, before we can be sharing that big, juicy alpha, can you guys smash the like button? I would be very, very appreciative if we could run up the like button today. And of course, maybe we'll bug you, maybe we won't. I guess you'll just have to find out, right? You never know if we're going to bug you in the middle of the show for the like button. But today, I would love if you guys could hit the like button. We're going to have a good show, nevertheless. Let's talk about Bitcoin. Let's talk about the markets. Bitcoin has had a pretty substantial amount of volatility that shouldn't be completely surprising, given what we've seen from equity markets here. The S&P down like 600 points in the last few weeks. VIX spiking near 30, near that 30 level. And of course, that's going to translate over into crypto, which I would say largely front ran a lot of this move that we're seeing on equities. But of course, there's that question. If equities continue to sell, is crypto going to continue to sell? Where are these things going to bottom, locally speaking? I think for something like ETH, that 2K level is really that line in the sand for bulls and bears. As I said, we've got that staking ETF announcement that came out this morning. We'll see how that materializes for price here over the next few days. And I think, to me, alts are beginning to show signs that they could potentially yield some rallies on their Bitcoin pairs in the coming weeks. So I'd love to talk about that as well. Obviously, we'll also talk about expectations for their dollar prices later on the show. But I really think we always love when equities and the quote unquote macro are driving price action, right? When are we going to bottom? We're kind of beholden a little bit to positioning in legacy markets. As I said, the S&P is down about 600 points from local highs. VIX traded near 30. I think from a timing standpoint, at least locally speaking, we're getting really close to that inflection point where I'm expecting to see some bounces from across the market. I do think you can still potentially see some lower pricing, specifically on alts before that happens, but I don't really know that I think the risk reward is still in place, to just continue hammering the ask. But I do think that the current rhetoric that has pushed markets lower from the current admin here over the last few weeks probably continues for the first half of this year, right? But I do think we're seeing many of the high time frame thematics playing out in real time that we've discussed on this show, right? They're bringing long end yields down so that they can eventually stimulate. And I think that's the key word here, right? It's stimulate. What does that look like? When is that going to happen? And ultimately, what does that mean for inflation? Of course, what does that mean for risk assets? And of course, for the sake of our conversation, what does that mean for our coins? But I'd love to open the floor up now. I'm happy to be back on Market Check, speaking with you all. And let's have a great show, guys.
Tommy with that intro, like he has, I do not know how many bones broken. He wasn't here for a while. He comes back in and just nails it.
It's like he didn't even almost die or something. It's incredible.
Indeed.
We need 1 million likes today for the 1 million bones in Tommy's body that are broken, okay? 1 like for every broken bone.
Yeah.
But Tommy, amazing to have you back, bro. Honestly, it's amazing. And people don't even know this, but the man is literally printing. He's stuck in a recliner right now. All he can do is trade. I won't share numbers. We were talking about it. This man is, I mean, you're probably having one of the best streaks of trading that you've had in a while. It seems like, I mean, you're kind of killing it, man. You know, I know that's all you can do. So you're stuck in this, chair in a horrible physical state. But like, you're killing it right now, man.
That was
Absolutely
Mac's
killing
master plan. Lock the man in a wheelchair so that he has all the time to trade.
We were joking about this before the show. He's like, I have a lot of like clarity right now, and like I have like a much healthier view of the market. And I was like, so all I need to do in order to have more peace and clarity about my life and my job is almost die. And Tommy's like, yes, that's all you need to do. Instant clarity when you come out the other end of that.
It was a
makes us stronger, though.
Experience, an unexpected one, but nonetheless, I'm thankful for it. Not just for markets, but also kind of renewed perspective on how I view things in life as well. Not to get on a soapbox or to get corny about anything. I don't want to make the show about me, but I'm not thankful to be hurt, but I'm thankful, I guess, for the perspectives that have come out of it.
Yeah, well, hey, if there's a silver lining to it, then maybe that's it. Yeah, we're really, really thankful and blessed that you're even alive, given what happened. So I don't know, man. You're too smart. Your brain is too powerful. I couldn't have accepted you being a vegetable.
Dude,
so.
that was why, because believe it or not, I was one of the few people that witnessed this accident. First of all, this is like the worst ski wipeout I've ever seen in my life. And the second Tommy came down for the second time, I'm pretty sure he like smacked, went up, and then came down again. I saw his helmet flying. I was like, and it was horrible. But in the moment, I was like, holy shit, his head. Who's gonna cover his shorts? That was the first thought. I was like, oh my God, he has so much shorts open right now. What are we gonna do? I was like, Tommy's the only one like hitting trades right now. Man, but that was the first thought that actually went through my mind, and obviously his health.
So Louis, you had the front row seat to it.
Oh man, yeah, I was right behind them. It could have been me, right? If I wasn't like in front of him, if I wasn't behind him, I could have made the same mistake. It was a really sketchy setup on the mountain. Honestly, should have been like roped off or something, because that was really sketchy for sure. But yeah, I got a front row seat for it. It was pretty crazy. But
somebody called me Professor X.
That's pretty spot on, actually.
Wait. Stephen Hawkish. Oh my goodness.
Oh no.
Wow. You guys are clever today, man. That's fantastic. But yeah, I want to talk about this ETH staking. We've been talking for a while. This is not the first we've heard about, the imminent staking and, yield component coming to these ETFs. I'll just start with this because we could really break it down and go a lot of different ways. It was an announcement this morning, I think right before the New York Open, maybe like 3 to 5 minutes before the New York Open. So initially I was thinking, all right, this is a New York Open scam pump. But then it kind of kept moving a little bit. And I'm like, this seems a little bit too big for a scam pump. What's the news? Saw the headline, staking coming to, I believe it was the Fidelity ETF. I'll ask you guys this. Is that going to be the big narrative to get ETH back on track? Is that boomers love their yield, and there's nothing that gets the boomer more excited than a little 3 to 5% APY. So is that enough to get ETH back on track, or is it just kind of another gimmicky narrative?
I think it could single-handedly save ETH in the alt market right now.
Single-handedly.
Yeah. I think if you get that announcement, the whole argument of people saying, no one uses ETH. It's not good for anything, right? Why would institutions and big money buy the ETFs? Well, they can get exposure to the crypto market and emerging asset class, as well as earn a passive yield. They're going to gobble that up like
It
love
does
a good old yield.
differentiate one big thing from the Bitcoin ETF, because like
Yeah.
the boomers might be like, I'm good with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Pet rock, go up. Like, I'm good. But if they think, hey, there's actually another product here, I don't understand really what it is, just like I don't really understand what Bitcoin is, but I can get some juicy APY. The boomer loves APY, man. Like the 40 to 50-year-old plus mind loves a dividend, man. They love their dividends. They love it.
Yeah.
I do think it's eventually going to be a bullish catalyst. I think for me, the question is just going to be about time frame, right? The biggest thing with the ETH ETF is that, you know, I think you want to see these utility distinctions in utility made from between Bitcoin and ETH, right? Because Bitcoin has fully graduated into that commodity. Well, maybe not fully, but right. Like the narrative is that it is graduated into that commodity asset class. It's a storage of value, an inflation hedge, digital gold, you know, whatever you want to call it. And at the same time, I think what's really hurt ETH this cycle is that it's just trading as ETH beta, or not ETH beta, but Bitcoin beta. And you want to see it have, like, you need to give boomers, you need to give these TradFi entities a reason to get excited about it beyond just the narrative, okay, it's Bitcoin beta, but we have lots of Bitcoin beta, right? We have a lot more network activity on something like Solana that has just kind of on a correlation basis very clearly served as Bitcoin's beta throughout this cycle. So I do think that this is the biggest catalyst for ETH. I think it will play out probably on a long time horizon, but it is ultimately what will distinguish ETH from these other altcoins, these other assets that are not Bitcoin, and give boomers ultimately a reason to believe that they can accrue value while holding it.
So we're bullish. That's what it sounds like. So we're bullish on that narrative.
I'm big on the narrative. I mean, I don't. The staking yield doesn't necessarily excite me, but what excites me is the fact that eventually you're going to be able to tokenize assets on ETH. At least not everything is good. Like not every micro payment, not every small transaction is going to be done through ETH, but I think large sums of capital will probably be finalized on ETH at some point, and that will enable just kind of another layer for the TradFi Ponzi.
To me, it's insanely bullish narrative, but obviously, as we've been discussing this already when they had their first filling. This is, as far as I heard, this is the third one. So obviously, this is not a done deal, and it will always be about when it finally goes in. That will be the most important, because if we remember, even that the current ETF that we had, it also went kind of unexpected. It started as like, hey, we will have a ETH ETFs after BTC1. And then the probabilities were so low, and then suddenly they kind of approved it in its current state. So we know that it's going to happen at a certain point, but the question is at what point, of course. And currently, that can take still time, but over a long run, that is, in my opinion, it's probably the most bullish catalyst for ETH. As there is. I do not think there is a better one than this, because the ETFs in their current form are really unattractive, as it may, like, I'll give an example. For a boomer, it doesn't make much sense, or for anyone really, whether you buy spot Bitcoin or ETF Bitcoin. Actually, with ETF, you have way less work, right? And the fee compensation is totally worth it. But people are not really using BTC as like for what it is. They just want to speculate on the price. And in that regard, buying spot ETF makes more sense than buying spot Bitcoin. But in its current form, it makes no sense to buy ETH ETF, because if you want to hold it for a long time, then you want to buy spot ETF. Sorry, you want to buy spot ETH and then stake it, right? Because you will get way more returns on that part. But when that staking ETF goes live, you no longer, the people who just want to speculate, they no longer need to do that, and they can buy that ETF, and that will bring, and it's very easy for them, right? Like lots of people like it as simple as possible, and if they can just call their broker and be like, hey, buy me ETH ETF, and it has that staking yield, it's just going to be awesome, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Hey, look, I'll take whatever I can get with ETH these days, man. I don't care what it is. Anything. I'll take it.
Yeah,
Anything. But I actually
I'm
do think it's a legitimate narrative.
Yeah.
Like I actually think it will drive some interest, right? Louis, you got any charts for us? I'd love to see some Louis charts today.
surely. What do we got? Let's see what we're looking at here. All right.
I do wonder if if we're at a point where it's going to be harder and harder to generate yield on mega cap tech US equity stocks, right? Like your Nvidias, your Apples, if they've hit like a saturation point in value for any period of time, right? Like where are you going to turn next to potentially generate yield? You're probably just going to try to get yield off the assets that you already own. So on a long time frame, it's the type of catalyst that's going to turn ETH into a commodity, now that I'm thinking about it.
Nice.
Louis, let's get you up there. All right. How do we feel about this chart, man? I mean, getting really oversold, but that alone is not a reason to just shove.
Yeah.
I think the big question is, does this spring into a lower high and we actually go to the green box? Or do we kind of range, reclaim, and go from there?
Yeah, kind of where I'm at. We're coming into, deep demand. I have this box as drawn out as demand, but in reality, this is all your demand here. So, this has been pretty much down only, right? We haven't really seen much bounce at all out of the major indices, right? But what is a good sign is which gives you some sort of signal is the RSI, right? So just looking back previously, every time the RSI has come into this level, it's marked a bottom, right? It's marked a low, right? So not to say that this is the lowest S&P is going to go, but it's good signal and good back testing to say that, yeah, this is probably our general area where we should see some sort of relief bounce of some sort. And again, like Max said, is it a bounce that creates a lower high and we have a deeper correction, right, before ranging, basing, and then maybe coming back out? Or is this like our low? Was this our pullback? And is the market just going to continue on its merry way like it kind of always does, right? So that's kind of the big question. But at least knowing the fact that we're in the general area, of this relief bounce is good enough to me to, feel a little more optimistic for sure. And I like the fact that we kind of came straight down, right? Like Jackus says all the time, like you don't want these relief bounces, right? Because when you get these relief bounces, all they do is kind of prolong the inevitable, which was coming down here in these areas, right? So I like the fact that we kind of ripped the Band-Aid off. We're coming down. And the closer we get to a bottom, or at least a local bottom on the S&P, the closer I think we are to a bottom in crypto. And I say that because I like to use the example from back in, I think this is 2023, right? And if I map Bitcoin down below, So when you go back to 2023, right, the S&P had a long, had a decent correction, right, coming out of the bear market lows, had a nice run, and had its first kind of serious correction coming out of the bear market that it had, and kind of similar to what we're seeing now, right? We're seeing a scenario where the S&P is down like 8%. S&P first drop, 5-6%, something like that. But what you notice is that Bitcoin topped or put in its local high weeks before the S&P did. So, Bitcoin puts in its local high, S&P continues to grind higher. S&P puts in its local high, a couple weeks later. You get your first initial 5-6% drop off of that high. And as you do that, Bitcoin, catches up and does a bigger move. I think this is probably like a 20% drop, or 15-16% drop. So you see Bitcoin front run the top, but you also see Bitcoin drop hard when you see that, that larger drop or correction in the S&P. But what I want to bring your guys' attention to is what happened after this, right? So S&P came down, had its first leg down. S&P bounced, right? We're seeing the relief bounce, right? But it ultimately was a bounce that rolled over into a larger correction. We ended up going down, from bounce high, another almost 9%. But what you notice about Bitcoin is Bitcoin bottomed at the first local bounce, right? After the first leg down for the S&P, right? Bitcoin was pretty much bottomed, and the S&P continues to roll, but Bitcoin in that same time period was grinding higher well before the S&P was bottomed. So I know there's a lot of people saying, well, like the S&P, if the S&P keeps falling, Bitcoin and crypto and altcoins are likely going to continue falling as well. And I would say, well, if you look back at the data in similar scenarios where we've seen, these kind of things play out, we've seen that Bitcoin, it tops before, right? It is reflexive and front runs the move, but also front runs the lows, right? So it kind of works both ways, where I'm looking for the first initial bounce off the S&P. Whether that's the bounce or it rolls over, I'm not really too concerned, because I think I've seen enough data that showing me that, because we front ran the initial move, we can see Bitcoin and crypto top a lot earlier than the S&P and equities do, right? So that has me pretty optimistic on the market right now, because ETH and altcoins have been getting absolutely pummeled for like a month and a half, 2 months, right? And the markets can only go down so much, and markets don't go down in a straight line, right? So what I believe is we've been seeing ETH, altcoins extremely front run this move. We saw Bitcoin, stall out before the S&P did, and I think we front ran the initial drop, and I think we're going to front run the low, the absolute bottom on the S&P. So that's why I'm kind of looking for this, this S&P bottom, at least the first local low, because once we get that, I think Bitcoin and ETH has the green light, as long as nothing, astronomical happens and there's like some black swan event. So.
Yeah, that's great analysis, Louis. I love that example, like that clear divergence, because the most popular argument that I hear, and logically, to be fair, it makes perfect sense.
No, it does make sense.
We understand, like, hey, if equities are weak, it's going to put a lot of pressure on crypto. But I think what people fail time and time again to note is that crypto will top before equities, and crypto will bottom before equities, and altcoins will typically puke before Bitcoin, right? It's kind of this flow of like the weakest link always kind of craps out first. Yeah. It takes a long time for equities to roll over compared to Bitcoin, and especially altcoins, right? So actually, for legacy, I think if you're like a stock market trader rather than a crypto trader, there's probably a lot of merit in looking at what Bitcoin and ETH and altcoins are doing. So if you're like, I'm feeling a little queasy about the state of the SPX or QQQ or IWM, you should probably take a look at what Bitcoin and ETH and altcoins are doing, right? Because that might give you a lot of signal. For us, you got to look for your signal elsewhere, right? But just like crypto will top before, major indexes, it will also typically bottom before. It doesn't mean we're going to immediately like diverge or something like that. It just means that Bitcoin will put in a 60-day puke for equities in a matter of 48 hours. That happens all the time. So I really do like this example. And one thing about it as well is that, from that correction right there, like the summer of 2023 until that puke low, I think Bitcoin was down like on the lowest wick, because there were some wicks that were lower, like Bybit futures had a bigger wick. I think it was like a 25-ish% correction. Equities, I don't know. I think maybe they corrected about 12%, 10%, something like that. We're seeing somewhat comparable pullbacks right now. It's somewhere in that ballpark, right? So I do really like this example. I mean, it's generally my bias that this isn't the start of some major recession. So I think if this is just a nasty technical correction that, is of course being maybe catalyzed or accentuated by some of like the global trade war fears and stuff like that, it would make sense that this is just another one of these like nasty kind of like intra-cycle corrections that we see all the time. But I'm not really willing to give up on like the president's first term here, right? Like talking a little bit more cyclically, going back to 2017, January, February, March, basically garbage for Bitcoin and risk. Trump's first 60 to 90 days in office. But typically, not always, but typically, a president's first term, a president's first year after taking office is typically very, very bullish. So I'm not really willing to give up on Trump's first term in office right now. I know that there's some theories around him like trying to tank the market because he's at tug of war with Powell. You could certainly be right. It kind of seems like that's what's happening. Like they're just playing a game of chicken with each other. Like he wants pressure and pain so that he gets the conditions that he wants. I don't know if he's being that thoughtful, like I don't know if it's really that calculated directly just from him, but I think he knows what needs to happen for lower interest rates, and QT to stop. But I think you're going to see a lot of things rally here later this year, and maybe even in the short term, just like Tommy was talking at length about this. I think it was on our Discord call yesterday in the afternoon. There's a lot of altcoins that are potentially going to have some big, big, big recovery rallies here over the coming couple months. So I think this is just a nasty technical correction. I don't think it's the start of a new recession, personally.
Yeah, I think how often in crypto is it that you just kind of see like a relentless 3 or 4 month downtrend without any, even if the like let's say the trend continues, right? Let's say growth continues to scare the market for the first half of this year. I mean, how often do you see in crypto, at least, no counter trend rallies for effectively 4 months, which is kind of where altcoins are sitting right now. And I just don't really think that, if you've been in this market for a while, you know how aggressive that these rallies can tend to be. So even if USD prices go lower in the near term, I think we're very close to rallies across the board, not just in crypto, but also in equity markets. I mean, it's usually not the first move down, even if you are a bear. It's usually not the first move down that's actually the rewarding one. You get that face ripper in between that tests every bear's conviction. Probably a lot of range, a lot of vicious squeezes before any of that. I think there's a lot of confidence on the bearish side, and perhaps rightfully, but I do think that we are in store for probably some pretty large reversion on alt BTC pairs upward here over the next few weeks. So I am looking to bid, not necessarily today, but potentially later this week, maybe next week. I'm not quite sure what the timing looks like. I like the idea of playing these altcoin bounces here because, I mean, just from a mean reversion standpoint, they are so beaten down. But I do think on a general level, on a higher time frame basis, as frustrating as it is, we probably will be somewhat beholden to what what stocks are doing, what equity markets are doing. Unfortunately, recession fears. Obviously, we'll kind of see how that persists throughout the first half of this year. But I mentioned it in the intro. I think it's increasingly important, especially for altcoins, is, what does the stimulus that we're more than likely going to get look like? And when does it come? How does that impact inflation fears? And how does that impact the coins? I think there are a lot of variables, but ultimately, it's a very volatile market right now. And I think if you're looking to play it both ways, I mean, there's just so many coins that are so beaten down. I think, for example, I mean, there are like a lot of coins on chain that if Bitcoin and ETH were to give you like a 20 to 30% rally from here, or even from like a lower level, a lot of these on-chain coins are going to pull 400 or 500% in a fairly short amount of time. I'm sure you have teams that are looking to launch. You've also, I don't know when it's going to be. I'm just going to put this out there. I don't really think this is imminent, but I do think at some point this year, you're probably going to have some tail risk from things like a Kraken IPO, Gemini IPO. These people are going to want to pump the market
Ripple.
Whenever these things do occur. And I think that's something to be conscious of at some point this year.
That's really interesting. I hadn't considered the idea of more large US centralized exchanges IPOing.
Yeah.
That's something I hadn't really ever thought about. That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be this year. I thought this year was going to be like the year of the crypto IPO. But looking more or less like end of this year, early next year, type of thing, end of 2025, most of 2026. Will be the years of the crypto IPOs where you're going to see a bunch of crypto companies starting to go public. I mean, there's bullish times to come, guys. There's a lot of bullish times to come if you zoom out and look at the forest instead of the trees. But the trees right now is the local crappy price action, right? But the forest is an emerging asset class that's being adopted by the big money and big institutions, right? They're finally taking this into their regime. So yeah, short-term pain, but long-term, it's going to bring the liquidity and the money we need to continue sending these markets higher, right? And actually changing and helping the world in some way or the other. So it's very exciting times.
Mm-hmm. Totally. All right. What else do you guys want to talk about? Do we want to talk about like IWM? Because here's the thing, people were ragging on ETH, of course. Someone was like, ETH, it's the second largest crypto asset and it's down like 60% in the past few years. Like, what the heck, basically? I think the same could be said about something like IWM. Like, if you remove the 20, 25 largest companies in the world and you just look at equities besides those, the mega caps, right? Things haven't really done too much, It's really just been like a handful of businesses that have just dragged up the larger, the broader indexes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Russell and the low cap stocks are the only kind of major indice that hasn't broken into price discovery yet. And that's another thing that I was talking about more so at the beginning of February when we first started seeing these, the big sell off in ETH and altcoins. It was before even the S&P and the market started to look weaker. Was eventually people are when they're the markets are selling off because people are taking profits on large positions that they made a lot of money on, right? The S&P, the NASDAQ have all been rallying hard for the last 2 years, right? Two and a half years. So my question to you is, what do you think they're going to do with that money? They're investors, obviously, right? You think they're just going to take those profits, put it in their pocket and walk away? right? Or putting it into a bond yield or whatever, as yields are probably going to continue to come down. No, they're going to look and say, okay, that was a nice trade. We caught that. We caught that rally on the major stock indices. What usually pumps next? What's sitting at value? Where can I get a deal where asset prices are on sale and not overbought but oversold? Low cap stocks, crypto, altcoins, right? That's next on the menu, in my opinion, right? The more money you make, the more risk you're willing to take, and the higher down the risk curve you're willing to go to continue to chase those gains and churn your profits, right? So I just don't buy that people are gonna take all this money off the table and not put more to work, right? At least some of it. So you kind of gotta move to where the puck is going, not where the puck is, right? You kind of gotta see where things are headed, right, before it happens.
That all-time high sweep that the Russell had right there, just vicious, man. What a fake out.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of viewing IWM the same way that I'm viewing ETH, in the sense that, I mean, I don't know how long the data on small caps dates back to. I know the Russell, I think, goes back to like around the time of the tech bubble. Maybe, okay, so like mid 1980s. So we don't have kind of how small caps traded during something like the 60s, the 70s, but I think it's kind of like ETH, right? Where I don't know if the small cap index will necessarily outperform, but I do think there are always gonna be some individual small caps that continue to perform, largely based on fundamental narratives, right? We always hammer how good. I mean, Hood has looked so good. It is pulling back right now after it had a blow off top, but Hood had very logical reasoning and I think a narrative to make people want to buy it, to show investors that it could continue to accrue value in this market cycle. And I think, I go back to conversations that we had in probably like 2023. If we expect this to kind of trade somewhat similarly to that decade of commodities, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, that was a stock picker's environment. The indices obviously ranged for a prolonged period of time, but in between you had individuals that put in huge bursts of outperformance. So I kind of think I'm going to probably view small caps very similar to that lens, unless we see some heavy-handed stimulus that just kind of forces all small cap companies higher.
Yeah, we could be looking more like an environment that we saw in 2016, 2017 versus what we saw last cycle, right? Which was this. We didn't get this big vertical move like we saw in 2021 with all the stimulus from COVID, right? This was like a Russell cycle and hyper speed, right? Hyper gear, right? This was what we saw out of the Russell during the 2016, 2017 bull run, right? It was just a slow grind higher, right? It didn't go, parabolic at any point. It kind of just slowly grinded higher over time for about a year and a half before topping out, right? So I think it makes sense that we should be gearing up for more or less something like this than what we saw here, which I'm fine with, right? I'm fine with that. And then if you throw a little stimulus in towards the end, why not, right? But looking more or less like a slow grind higher over time versus, just parabolically ripping to the upside. And this would probably be more like a stock picker environment, like you're talking about, Tommy. I think that makes a lot more sense. But like gradually, this will continue to rise, break all-time highs. But you're not going to get the big, unless we do get stimulus, right? You get stimulus, all bets are off. You get rate cuts dropping in a quick fashion. You get stimulus of some sort. Maybe we do, see some more verticality out of this. But you could also just see a slow grind higher over, the next year and a half. So
I want to pose a question to you guys about that stimulus. I've been kind of thinking about it, obviously, as I've been prospecting the long TLT trade, and about a week ago, I was getting very excited about TLT because I do agree. Like, I think they're clearly trying to bring yields down. Inflation's coming down, so it makes sense. But if the market were to decline, right, and they have to stimulate, wouldn't that kind of like reinvigorate those inflation fears, potentially driving yields higher? That's kind of a question I've been asking myself this week. Like, what would that stimulus mean for the market?
Well, let me ask you this first. Do you think it's likely that we see a resurgence of inflation? Because I was seeing some data on like Truflation, I think it was this week, where we're actually trending down pretty aggressively, like towards the Fed's target of 2%. Do you think it's super likely that that even happens?
I mean, as of right now, not really. There's not really like data that, in my opinion, shows that inflation is going to make a huge resurgence. But if we do start kind of stimulating the market, whether that's by cutting or ending QT or by reigniting QE, those would probably I don't know if I think yields come down in that situation. So I kind of feel like you would like the yields to fall before that happens.
Yeah, the yields have been really sticky. How does the TLT chart look actually? I feel like I want to look at it while we're talking about it, because did we end up double bottoming perfectly, or did we front run it?
I think we front ran it. Yeah, we did.
Okay.
I can't tell if I think that TLT is going to go down and make another low yet or not. This is kind of like the last level that I think it could make a rejection before it sends higher. But I think the higher probability long trade on something like TLT is probably going to be on a reclaim of that like 94 level.
Yeah. I'm personally of the opinion that yields have topped. I mean, I just can't at this point really imagine a scenario. I mean, it would be really freaky, honestly, if yields hadn't topped and somehow we end up having to like re-hike later on. I don't know. I mean, we're talking about literally, like, in my view, a doom scenario for the market if that happened, unless I'm missing something. But when I look at something like the 10-year, it looks awfully distributive to me, right? I know some people think you can't do TA on, you can't do TA on yields. You can, it works. But Louis, maybe you could pull up the 10-year, or maybe Jack, as you have some thoughts too. I know that you watch yields pretty closely. But yeah,
I kind of feel inflation. Sorry, Jackus. I was just going to say I kind of feel like inflation could be a lagging indicator because there's such a fear of it right now.
I can discuss yields, but I actually promised to answer a certain question regarding ETH and how I was able to foresee this 1750 drop that we got to Jushiro. So I can touch upon that instead, maybe. Just
yeah,
give
whatever
me,
you want.
give
Let
me a
him cook.
sec. Okay. And hopefully the screen doesn't black out anymore. I guess that got fixed
For now.
for now. Yeah, so the question was if you could elaborate on how to define the levels to which ETH would pull back. I'm not sure if that question is like from now, Jushiro. Higher time frame market structure, 6 candle rule. I suppose 6 candle rule is a swing. I'm not sure. And horizontal support and resistance, yes. But how did you say with sort of certainty it would come down this low? Thanks for being here, guys. So first of all, I obviously didn't know it was a certainty. You can never know anything in life with certainty, right? You only play probabilities, but to me, they were quite big at the time. So let's discuss that. So first of all, I still will stand by the fact that it was a good decision, right? Let's even start from like when we were trading around these prices with ETH being above, let's say 3 to 4K, right? So if we look at prior historical examples, even if we use Doge in that regard, let me use Doge, right? Then, not this chart. And I suppose I have to use really this one. So even if we were to look at the prior examples, time-wise, so you would look at the timing, and you would see that approximately each bull market started or ended basically like 1,100, 200 days from a prior market cycle top. The same thing happened, in 2017, just as it happened in 2021. You can see 1,100, 200 days. This cycle, we were on 1,100 days already, here. So that was sort of like, the first leg was coming along with a plan. And then the second leg was sort of like after it already. We were long past due for that alt season to sort of begin. And again, it comes really to a definition of what we deem to be an alt season. To me, that's when alts are broadly outperforming Bitcoin. And I definitely want to see, like, to define a cycle, I want to see these coins to trade above their prior cycle all-time highs into a price discovery. So far, this was the first cycle in which we have not seen that, right? We have not seen yet the market all around break its all-time highs. Even if you look at ETH from prior cycle top, again, you would see approximately 1,000, 100, 200 days. Obviously, the top was sort of different depending on coin we were looking at. So some coins were topped around, March, April, May 21, some in November. But even if we take it from the November top, right, that was coming along time-wise with that alt season, right? 1,100 to 1,200 days, as we just described. So by any evidence, whether it was market structure, whether it was IWM that was just sweeping its all-time highs, it's simply, and I do not care what people will, tell you how you could have foreseen the drop. I do not think you could have foreseen the drop until you got the confirmation, because until then it was just a speculation, just a wish, right? It's sort of like now that we are approaching major support, people are wishing for $800 ETH. And I'm not saying it cannot happen. I think it certainly could, because anything can happen. I just don't deem it as a high probability. So again, looking at the time aspect, ETH at this point, and again, before there was the question, when did the bear market truly started? So we could have sort of been already here, sort of. Again, it got postponed. If you guys remember, we escaped this drop very well, and then were rebuying right at the lows, as much as we could have done in that situation. And then the market was really ready to go for price discovery, in my opinion. Both IWM, again, sweeping all-time highs, just as ETH was sweeping this 4K high. Obviously 4.1, but, rounding it. So looking back, to me, this is where ETH had all the probabilities to continue higher in that bull market based on prior cycles, time theory, market structure, and so forth at that time. And it made no sense to me to be selling ahead because you had a upside risk. Now, what I mean with that upside risk, I've been in the prior market, in the prior, cycle, and not just this one, even partially the one before, and few others on different assets. So back then, you were in a similar situation, not exactly maybe right here price-wise, but back in the last cycle, people were also here saying that we will go lower and retest levels. And if it happened, they would tell you it was obvious. But in reality, you had the upside risk, and I was aware, and I stayed in the market, and the market rewarded me. And I think this was the same right here. You had that upside risk, big upside risk, and I deem it to be much bigger than just waiting and giving some profits back to the market. And keep in mind, these were still profits because I was rebuying here, and obviously all the way through, right? Keep that in mind. So back then, you wanted to hold here still. Nobody, like from my approach to the market, from my personal approach, and I'm not playing like an hourly time frame. Again, understand that, please. It was good to stay long, right? So when exactly did I foresee this drop to this level incoming? Well, when, as you guys also know, I go level to level, and I told you this many times, I remain bullish as long as the market is, right? And the market to me stopped being bullish, like that narrative that I just outlined, that to me was there in the charts, again, based on facts, based on time and so forth, and psycho theory. That time remained as long as we held this support, because this support was key to me, as we have broken, this was the recapitulation. We had a bottom range for 3 months. Compare it time-wise to this structure and this one, and you had a perfect range reclaim, and there was no need to be losing the support. We could have swept it, and that happened in January still, but you could not have been losing it. The moment, and this was well communicated, by the way, I was communicating this well ahead. We cannot be losing it. And then we were pumping just, into Friday, and it really felt like we are going to break out. We've broken out here, but faked it. And then through the weekend, we were dropping. And then I remember I was, enjoying my weekend as usual with friends and family. And then suddenly I get like so many tags. And it's like, hey, Jake, the invalidation is coming. What do we do? And I had to decide in like an hour. And I was like, yeah, this shouldn't have happened if we were bullish. So I'm out. And again, the reason for me was that we were losing, and it was happening on Sunday too. So I know that the weekly would already close around this level. It was not easy decision, especially given the bias that I had, right? We all had. And so when you lost the support and you lost this range, this prior one, this reclaim of it, that to me signified that something has changed. And then we had this, I would want to clarify this, right? Because I feel this is where lots of people got insanely confused, because lots of people saw that this was the capitulation. But to me, this was no capitulation. To me, this was a liquidation bounce. And liquidation bounces happen lots of times. The same thing happened here for ETH. And then the market, and this is not the best example. I think the better example, although at the same time, actually happened on Bitcoin. Let me show you that right away. And I was discussing this at the time too, where, let me maybe just have a clean chart somewhere. All right. So this, and here I do not have price history. Let's try KuCoin, maybe. Okay, not clean either.
He just cooks too much on every chart.
True. This one is gonna do it. So back here, right? And this is something I was just discussing in my newsletter too, which is free, by the way, for this week. So be sure to check it out, guys. I was discussing, and obviously this will, these weeks will be different exchange to exchange. You want to look at major ones like Binance, Coinbase, and kind of look at the Confluence, because the liquidations can take it deeper on certain exchanges, right? But more or less they looked like this, all wicks lining up. But even if the wig was slightly lower, it wouldn't have made that much difference. So to me, again, the capitulation happened in August. That was what people did not expect. People expected the continuation. And then it was coming very quickly, lots of volume on it too. And then you had the bottom, after the capitulation, you had the sideways action. This is very important, right? Like I'm trying to get to the fact why I thought we are going to go down and where the cycle deviated, because all of these is like the context that I decipher, right? When I'm making my decisions. So you can just I could just say, yeah, I think it's going to go lower, but this is actually what's going through my head when I'm describing these higher time frame probabilities. So this was it, and this was not it, because we liquidated to the same level but not capitulated. Like capitulation, from my definition, is when people give up, when they capitulate their positions and are out mentally, mainly mentally too. And that was here, right? Like we've broken below the support. People were thinking this is a resistance, versus here, when we've broken down, so many people instead were hoping that this was the liquidation and we are coming straight back up. But again, the capitulation would have to happen to the current levels, and maybe in a bit slower time too, because this happened in a single day, which was too quick for me too, for people to capitulate. I went to bed when prices was like here, and then I woke up and we had this week already and prices were here. So like lots of people couldn't even have time to capitulate. You need that. And so again, going back, the capitulation would have to happen back here, down here. And if that happened, I would say yes. But given the fact that it only dropped to these levels where we were before, that made no sense. Why would you twice go back to the same levels? So it made sense to capitulate below these levels, because right now, this is where people are truly capitulating, right? This is where people are like, fuck bear market, and you start to see like, $1,000 targets for ETH and so forth. So again, to me, I view this as a liquidation bounce. And I was discussing it at the time. And if you look at it, it played out exactly the same. You had the liquidation bounce and you had all these lows sitting just above the demand. And then guess what the market did? You saw no follow through on this liquidation bounce back then. Just a mild bounce, just like here, sort of. And then you see this range, and then instead you see the continuation. And so I think we are sort of coming to this area right now. And this is where the capitulation really must start unfolding. Again, this is where we are right now. This is where people will view it as support kind of getting broken. And now people might be looking to short this as a future resistance, which it might serve on the first go. I'm not sure exactly how it forms, but I know these are very discounted levels. And so I do not know if we are going to hold this. Again, you never have anything with certainty, but I view it as a probability. And just like I was ready to flip bearish if we are going to lose this level, if we are to lose this, first of all, you need to view this as a mega bottoming range, and that we are currently retesting. And then you look, if you want to narrow it, you want to look at the higher time frame range lows and the demand right here. If we are to lose it, then you are likely truly coming to these levels, but you cannot know that ahead. Right now, it's just a speculation. For that, you would need truly recession to come in and kick in, and you would need SPX to go another minus, like 15% lower from the current prices. So I do not see that currently happening. I think this scare-off was a really big one, and I'm ready that people will not agree with me yet again on that, and that's totally fine. But yeah, I think right now, as you are in a big demand, you kind of expect it to hold rather than otherwise. But if it doesn't, which surely can happen, none of us wants to see that. But if you will need to act quickly again. But until it happens, I will once again remind BNB, which everyone was telling me. Sorry for those notes. I'll try to look at the clean one. No, BNB. Right. Goose. Jesus. KuCoin saves me all the time. Everyone was anticipating a breakdown here on BNB. I was saying that there is a very good likelihood of a deviation below this range, below these lows, right? And that's sort of, by the way, where ETH is right now. You're like on this breakdown and you're inside of here. And what you could get in here on ETH is exactly the same. We could spend here like, I don't know how much is this, looks like 10 weeks. Maybe we spend down here 10 weeks, maybe not. Maybe it's shorter. We'll see. But as long as we were there and we were holding this bigger support, I was saying you expect it to hold and potentially become deviation. And I didn't have the confirmation until we reclaimed the range, right? I didn't have it, but I sort of anticipated, even given where Bitcoin was at the time and so forth. And everyone back then kind of flipped and was expecting BNB to become FTT 2.0 and see that breakdown. So, and that's sort of what people are saying with ETH at 1K right now. They are expecting the support to break. And I'm not saying it cannot happen, but I just think it's not a reasonable thing to do right now. So I hope that sort of explains where I kind of was able to foresee the drop for ETH here coming in. It's not like I wanted to see that, because I wanted us to continue higher from here, as you guys know, but it is what it is, and I had to react. So, and yeah, I still think, by the way, that we can easily see, since I'm here, we can easily see on ETH, something like this down here, as I discussed. So be ready for it, right? If it comes, be ready for it. Anyways, hope that answered the question.
Jackus, what do you think about the way that price action has kind of unfolded coming into these levels? Because if you would have told me that Bitcoin traded into 75, 76K, ETH into mid 1700s, I would have expected it probably more so on a wick than kind of the slow bleed that we've had over the last 2 weeks.
On ETH, slow bleed?
Yeah, I mean, that I don't. It's pretty orderly selling, I think, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So I kind of view it as a fast thing, because like, if I look at the day, so I understand where you're coming from, Tommy, right? Like, that it was nothing sort of like this drop, or let alone this drop, right? Well, they are kind of similar though, but yeah, it could have happened this quickly, like during COVID back here on February 3rd. And but it still happened very quickly, in my opinion, because what could have easily happened, and what would be way worse, if we, like, when we had this drop, we would spend way more time here and we would do like this, and then we would see that drop, right? That would be way worse. Yeah. Like so I think, if I look at this chart overall, I am seeing it happening very quickly, honestly. This sell-off is coming as quickly as this capitulation. And this is sort of where people start to give up, and I think we are in a different context, cycle wise, than we were in here. But I'm just saying that these sell-offs truly change people's sentiment and vibe. And so I kind of view it that it came. I kind of view it that it came really quick, because these sell-offs can get way longer, way more drawn out. That said, I see your point from like an H4 perspective, and I would say I think truly the big guys are accumulating, and they are. Like we can see that, right? We can see that they are buying a lot, and it does make sense because they are playing the longer game, and so and we know how it is. I mean, too, they are like exchanges are buying on each of these scary dips, and we know they'll be selling OTC in the future. And it will be exactly from like this whole period, in my opinion, when we are trading way higher.
They want me to turn the camera on. I can't do that, guys.
Yeah, and it's like you were saying, Jack. It's like that wick down. Sure, that was like super scary, but we got bought back up super quick, right? So yeah, people got scared for like a day or two, but once you're sitting 15-20% higher than the lowest point after that first big wick down, people are like, okay, we wicked down, but looks like we got bought back up. Like, it's okay, we're gonna be fine. But it's that follow through and more or less. I mean, yeah, like Tommy said, slow bleed. I mean, depending on what time you're looking at. But when you start to slowly come down back to those levels, and if even a little lower where we're sitting now, that's what really capitulates people, right? It's like those big moves are like, oh shit, like what the hell was that? But okay, we saw a big drop and we got bought back up. But it's when you start to roll over and start to come back to those levels, and that time of constantly just lower and lower without any sort of relief, that's what kind of capitulates people and throws them for a loop. And that's what really forces people to capitulate. Normally, right at the time where they should be paying attention to discounted prices, right? So,
yeah, and like exactly like this bounce that happened, like again, I went to bed and price was trading around 2,950. I remember that, and I woke up and we've already had this drop. I had like thousands messages, and then the price was already back up here. So like I go to sleep, prices here, and I wake up, we have this giant wing at prices already. Like I'm not sure exactly where it was, but like somewhere, like it definitely wasn't trading here, right? What would capitulate people in my time zone would be like if you are in a position and you go back to sleep and you're kind of hopeful, and then you wake up and the price is here, that you are scared. But if you see this giant wick, you're like, oh, hopefully that was it, and the price isn't that low from like where it was yesterday, so maybe we come back. And that kind of what kept people in the position all the way till now, in my opinion. And I try to tell people, try to imagine this week never happened. Try to view it like this. Oh, wait. And you basically have a clear downtrend. I think that week just fucked too many people. You would sort of see this, and you would be like, yeah, of course, this is just a matter of time before it breaks down. But that week that they just messed around with people. And I'm not saying wicks are useless, because they can provide lots of information, but yeah. Man, I still remember one guy who who told me I'm so wrong for getting bearish.
Who told you that?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, well. All right. Tommy, we're about at that time. Great having you back. You want to take us out?
Yes, let me pull a me for the first time in a while. If you guys enjoyed the show, you want to potentially hear more from the team or learn more from the team, we have a few different ways that you can potentially do that, right? You are looking to join the family. And again, I'll probably be a little rusty with the outro today, guys, but we do have, like I said, a few ways that you can take advantage of getting more exposure to the team. Starting with, of course, our premium Discord, guys. If you are looking for your go-to source of alpha, 4 to 5 hours of daily calls, access to our intimate thoughts on the market in real time, and of course, even at times our positioning, come check out our Discord, guys. We were nice enough to package this together, of course, with your go-to tool for the cycle, which is the BB terminal. So whether or not you are a lower time frame trader, if you're a lower time frame trader or scalper, you're probably either really enjoying the market right now or not enjoying it at all. But fortunately, we do have the tools for you to be able to conquer that. Of course, if you are a long-term investor looking for data to help you make long-term investment decisions, we have the tool for you as well. And soon, if you are an on-chain degen, you love meme coins, AI agents, whatever the newest narrative on chain, it can change all the time, right? We'll soon have the tool for you as well. So check that out. If you are looking to learn more from the team, we also have the BB Academy. So make sure to check that out as well, guys. Learn from the entire team, not just how we trade, but how we analyze markets and ultimately approach everything. But certainly the last few weeks in this market have been very difficult as well. Maybe you're having a hard time picking winners. Maybe you're having a hard time managing downside volatility. We also have an SEC registered hedge fund, BB Wealth Management. So make sure to check that out as well. And a reminder that we trade digital assets in a way that looks to capture their asymmetric history for upside returns, while also balancing the downside risk posed in any financial markets. But we'll be back for another episode of Market Check tomorrow. Typical start time around 11:15, 11:10 Eastern Standard Time. So you can catch us again here at the same time on any weekday. The market is, or the New York Stock Exchange is open. You can expect to see us on Market Check. But of course, make sure to tune in as well for Market Talk with the legendary King Wabi. That will be this afternoon and hosted through.
I'm sorry, Tommy. I should have told you. I got my boys club mega space today in 90 minutes.
Make sure to tune in for that as well. Boys Club Megaspace, Market Talk with King Wabi, both later this afternoon. So we've got content going for you guys all day. Make sure to tune in. But that's it from us, guys. We'll be back tomorrow for another episode. Thank you again, as always, for tuning in. And of course, stay safe.